Prozac, are you ready to chat? Oh, rude.
We're sleeping.
Welcome to Class Act Chats, where we talk about animal training, care, and behavior. You'll notice how I mentioned animal and not cats, because today's topic applies to more than just cats, which is why we brought on Brian Munro of Leaps and Hounds Dog Training. I thought he would be the perfect person to talk about this very difficult and nuanced topic. I hope that today's episode makes you think a little bit about this sometimes challenging and stigmatized topic.
Welcome to Class Act Chats. I'm very excited for our conversation today because we're talking about a sometimes kind of spicy topic that is really important to have an open and honest conversation about.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited for the topic today. A lot of nuance to talk about for sure.
I think that's one of the things that we just start out with before I even have you introduce yourself is just knowing that this is a difficult conversation and people have a lot of, how do I phrase this, really strong opinions on it.
I mean, it is just a hard conversation all around for all parties. I approach it from a very empathetic standpoint. Even so, emotions are high. Usually when we're starting to become involved in a case, there's a lot of, maybe it's on the heels of a recent incident. There's a lot of distress happening for the animal and of course for the family too. And there's usually other things going on, family dynamics going on, right? Life events, all kinds of other stressors happening. So it is definitely a hard conversation.
It's okay if people disagree with some of the stuff that we say, that everyone has different thoughts on this. And just if people are leaving comments, we ask that they keep them respectful.
Judge not, lest ye be judged, something of the sort.
Something, no judgment,
And that really is where we're coming from. And I think it's so easy to slip into that judger mindset, if only fill in the blank, right? But we just don't know even a quarter, even 100th of what's going on in a lot of these situations and in someone's life that's leading them to make such a difficult decision. Nobody obviously adopts an animal or purchases an animal from a breeder and then says, I'm doing this because I'm eventually going to rehome this animal. Like, I don't think that happens. I mean, maybe occasionally, but
never
it's
say
a
never.
fleeting
I'm sure there's
thought.
someone. Yeah.
But it's not the way, it's not how you go into it. Circumstances happen, behavior happens, life happens, events happen, stress happens. There you are, finding yourself amidst having to make a difficult decision. I think for anybody, myself included, that's had to consider this decision before. I've never made a decision to rehome, but I've had to consider it.
Yeah.
And I've certainly made end-of-life decisions for animals that I've lived with. And this is no different than that. That's just as hard of a decision. They're all hard, although obviously in different ways, and there's different levels there. But
I've had thoughts before when I first got Prozac here, who, by the way, I just want to acknowledge for people who aren't aware, Prozac has decided that he's going to take a nap in this chair, and so he gets to decide where he is, and I've decided that I am rehoming myself from this chair to this stool. So
as you should.
Exactly. If anyone should be rehomed here, it's me. Anyway, back to the serious part here. I've had thoughts with both Poutine and Prozac when I first brought them home because I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm making them happy. And granted, I was in a not so great place because I had recently lost Zoloft and I was really struggling with that because I really missed him. And I was worried that I wasn't a good fit for these two because Prozac, he was very nervous, which was actually part of what attracted me to him. Was I was like, oh, this poor cat is really scared. I want to help him. And Poutine was kind of the same thing. I was just like, man, I know what I'm doing and I'm going slowly and I'm giving them time and we're working on it. I'm being patient. And Prozac wasn't purring at all. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was in his vet records from the shelter, it said he was purring for the veterinarian on staff. And I was like, I must be really terrible cat parent if he was purring for the vet who, this is not a dig on vets. Vets are great. They just have jobs that cats aren't going to like being poked and prodded.
That's
naturally. Right. And like, it's not the vet's fault. It's just how it is. I could relate. I don't like being poked and prodded either. But I was like, okay, am I screwing this up? He was not super social. And I had this cat that was basically like glued to me for many years. And I was just like, I don't know. That has, for the record, that has all changed. Prozac is a snuggle bug. We are obsessed with each other, just for the record. So it did work out.
Clearly, he's joining your podcast.
Well, clearly he's in charge of it. Again, Brian, this is the Prozac podcast.
It's the director's chair.
This is the director's chair.
You need a signage back there.
So, Brian, I realized we dove kind of right into some like disclaimers and talking about things and also introducing, Prozac as being the new face of Class Act Chats. I didn't even have a chance to have you introduce yourself. Brian, I know who you are, but people who are tuning in and watching may not. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you? Why should people trust you? Especially, why should they trust you on such a nuanced, complicated topic?
Brian Munro, owner of Leaps and Hounds Behavior. Thank you for having me. I am a certified dog behavior consultant, a licensed family dog mediator, and a dog trainer. I've worked professionally in the field doing behavior consulting since about 2016. I've worked in animal shelter leadership positions. That's how I got interested in behavior, was through the shelter and working operations. I worked as an assistant director at this first shelter, which was a no-kill organization. Started as a board member, actually, about 15 years ago, and then transitioned. Imagine that, starting as a board member.
Pretty high up on like the rankings to start as a board member.
That's a mom and pop's kind of operation. You start as a board member and then you're all of a sudden involved in operations. I ended up accepting a position. I left the board and accepted a position as a shelter manager, management of staff and daily operations. But of course, in a smaller organization, you're kind of jumping in and you're doing intakes. You are doing adoptions, helping with volunteers. Doing all the things. I started learning about learning theory, the principles of behavior, some of the different sciences, how you apply some of those scientific principles and concepts. Learned about reward-based training, all the things. And so that's really where I got interested and pulled in. And then I took a hiatus after about 3 years of doing that because it was like, rescue shelter 24/7. And then I jumped into, worked at a co-op as a receiving supervisor at a co-op. It was just like such a dramatic shift. And then decided I felt this pull to get back into animal welfare because I feel like it kind of like gets in your blood. I applied for a position after that, ended up getting hired as a site manager for a large open admission shelter here in the Twin Cities, and then was moonlighting as a dog trainer, and then really started finding my niche, which was aggression cases from there. And so that's yes. Bitey dogs.
I feel like a lot of people tend to avoid aggression cases because they're like, they're really dangerous and they're hard, any number of things. And it's really good that there are people who enjoy doing that because some of those challenging cases, they can be so rewarding and you can make such a difference in the dog's life, the cat's life, the human's life, the, sheep's life, whatever animal you're working with. And
the community, all of the above. Yeah,
you keep everyone safe.
Absolutely. That's the goal is in a lot of those cases is, do we have safety? Let's get some safety going. Let's start to help the animal feel better. Let's start to meet the underlying needs. It took a while to kind of figure out where that was. And even so, with the family dog mediation trajectory that I'm on.
I hear about the family dog mediator all the time. What is it for people who aren't familiar? Like, what do you do as a family dog mediator?
Family dog mediation and the applied ethology or LEGS approach, LEGS standing for Learning Environment Genetic Self. It's an acronym.
So not this. This is not LEGS.
Those legs. I can always, I say this all the time. I can always tell when someone hasn't watched the intro webinar because I say, let's talk about your dog's legs. And they're like, my dog's fine. Look at his legs. And
Brian, it's appropriate that we have Prozac here because one of his many nicknames is Mr. Leggy because he likes to stick his little leggy out like this. Prozac, did you know that we would be talking about a different kind of legs and that's why you decided to take over my chair? I bet he knew.
That's it. What we do in family dog mediation is we as part of a behavior assessment, we look at, what are the behaviors? We kind of cluster out the behavior concerns, the presenting concerns. We try to understand what are triggers for those specific behaviors, or what's the context? What are the conditions in which they occur? And then legs really informs us more to, okay, but why are those behaviors happening? You're trying to figure out where that friction is for that particular dog, or some imbalance in their legs that is then manifesting as a behavior problem. And so where the family dog mediation piece comes in is to go, okay, so here's the behavior assessment. Here's some highlights on the legs, and we can analyze that more deeply or sort of more surface, depending on what the family needs. Now that we're understanding a little bit more about what the dog needs and where the dog is at and what we might do there, what are your expectations, family? For, what is your lifestyle? Where do your needs, your expectations, lifestyle, resources, your bandwidth, emotional bandwidth, we talk about that a lot, where does that intersect with the dog? And usually in there, that's where we start to kind of get to the root of why these behaviors are happening. I find myself talking a lot about what are some realistic expectations that you have, but we really want to understand, where is this dog at? Where is the family at? What does the dog need? What do you need? How do we start meeting some of those needs?
A lot of this is stuff that I don't necessarily use the legs framework intentionally necessarily, but I look at the environment and I'm like, okay, are there places for the cats to climb? And I kind of have to do okay, where's the client at versus where's their cat at? And is there expectation that the cat's going to be on the floor constantly? How realistic is it given the fact that they have a Bengal cat that is wild and has a lot of energy? And I mean, all cats climbing is a need for them, but Bengals in particular, they're going to be a little bit more climby. And is there an environment family mismatch? Is there an environment like a cat human, dog human, whatever, capybara human mismatch? What if it's looking okay, there is a irreparable mismatch between dog or, again, sheep, capybara, cat, hamster, Pikachu, whatever, and the family and the environment? How would you start approaching that? Or what would be some signs that you would look for that, this is something that maybe there's a big problem here that might need to take some different steps?
Well, first, I like to clarify, and I know this isn't necessarily a direct answer to your question, but I think it's important to say. I mean, I like to define roles. The dog behavior consultant or cat behavior consultant, there's their role. They're there to provide input and guidance, and then the client can decide kind of where they want to go with that. That's how I approach this. I don't approach this from there are some situations where, it's I don't know that Fluffy with a bite history that's very severe should be a therapy dog. But by and large, the decisions on how to move forward or which strategies we want to go with, I very much leave up to the clients. I have some ideas about management, safety, obviously, those patterns, that enrichment piece. But I kind of try to tailor what I'm suggesting. But that's my role, is to make the suggestion. I'm having a discussion with families about what are realistic expectations for you and your family that may look different for different family members. And then there's the role, let's say, of a veterinarian who is that dog's general practitioner, who is that dog's primary vet. They have a role in this too. They're evaluating, diagnosing, treating medical conditions. They may be prescribing. They may be giving supplements. They may be making recommendations on nutrition and health, all the things. They have a role in this conversation, and certainly a different responsibility there, having a veterinary license. And then there's the client's role. I really view them as the decision maker. So they get to make the care decisions. If there's risk in a case, they get to decide what's an acceptable level of risk for me. And then, of course, if any potential outcome decisions are being considered, that's their decision. And in rare circumstances, that may not be the case with a vulnerable population involved. The dog has a role to play in this, obviously, although they don't necessarily have the, self-governance, the autonomy to say, what they want to do, what they don't want to do to express that, at least in human language. And then, of course, you have other friends and family members that are involved that may be having an opinion or another about the dog's behavior and whatever. And that's all relevant. That's all important for us to consider. So I think that's usually where I start off with before we start getting into, is there a mismatch happening between that dog's needs, their, let's say, legs, and that environment? I don't know that there's one way that I specifically approach that conversation other than asking a lot of questions. I'm trying to understand oftentimes what is your motivation? Because that can be, for family members, they can have different motivations. That happens pretty regularly. Because of that, maybe there's some additional conversation that needs to happen. Maybe there is other support that family might need professionally that's outside of my purview.
Sometimes you can just kind of tell people are getting tired, and I'll just be like, hey, where are you at with moving forward? Let's talk about it. Like, how are you feeling? And if there's ever a situation where I'm like, okay, there seems to be a rift here, and is it reconcilable? I will tell people, okay, it seems like we have the X problem. If we were to try and address it based on all of the other stuff that you've already tried and the stuff that we've done, and this is probably what you would need to do, or you'd need to do this. Is this something that you can do, that you want to do?
Yeah.
There's no judgment on my end. Like, I'm here to support you, but like, this is what it would look like. And is that okay? And if not, that's okay. Like, it isn't a bad thing to be like, you know what? I know I'm not going to be successful with, I don't know, doing 37 hula hoop twirls every morning to keep my dog happy. I don't know why that would be. I work with cats, so clearly I don't know why that's the thing that I think that you would need to do. But
I'm gonna put that on my list of strategies here. Hold on, 37 hula hoop.
Brian, you don't have your clients do the 37 hula hoop twirls every morning?
Not yet, but I know it's weird. It's strange. See, now I feel like you're judging me.
I am, actually, because I mean, that is like basic, like, dogs 101 is they love exactly 37 hula hoop twirls.
I don't know how you came across 37. It seems very specific there, but
science, Brian. There's a lot of research on this. Go look it up after we're done.
So I think giving people different options is really helpful because there isn't one way to do this. The other thing that I think is important too is that I'm going to say something that's perhaps controversial.
I don't even know what it is. I'm already gasping. So,
but really not controversial. We're not fixing behavior.
Oh
Sorry.
my, no, it's true. I mean,
and I see it in the language too of, certainly within the professional dog training community, I can resolve this for you or fix this. That's not how behavior works. And
no, it takes time.
It doesn't work with humans that way.
No, it does not. Okay, as someone who comes from human mental health background, I mean, even looking at like a lot of the medications, which people sometimes are like, ooh, magic pill. Well, not really. Like, you have to think about what are the side effects? How long will it take for it to actually work? When can you make a judgment about how well it's working?
Are we doing behavior therapy? Are we learning new skill sets?
There's a lot of stuff there that it isn't a quick fix, and it's not just going to take one session. It's not just going to take, I mean, I've had a few clients recently that were working on something, and I will get like a rush of emails in the first week, and I'll be like, listen, like, this is going to take a little bit longer. I don't know how to say it other than like, let's see how much time, give the cat a little bit more time. And we want things to work out really rapidly, and that just isn't how it works in a lot of cases.
There's that great graphic on learning progress. It's not linear. You have your peaks and your valleys, and then you're all over the place. But the idea is to be moving in that direction over time.
We can kind of draw it here.
This is wonderful.
So people think it's like this, but really...
Different color. I love how he grabs a different color.
I'm prepared, kind of.
Almost like you were planning this.
So, no, I wasn't, but this is just a woo, and then...
That's about it.
Learning is more like the green one, not the black one.
And it almost looks like you kind of have a shoe in there.
Kind of,
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Oh, or Italy.
Yeah, it's Italy.
This is like the land of pizza and
wine. That is a beautiful illustration, by the way.
I'm going to auction this off. And no, I'm kidding. No one.
All proceeds will benefit Prozac.
Obviously, it's complicated getting to that point. What should people do if they're having thoughts of rehoming? That makes it sound like I'm talking about like a side effect of an antidepressant or like something like that. But what if people are thinking about it? Like, what are some of the best steps that they can take, or what can they do? Where can they get more information?
Contact a certified dog behavior professional or professional dog trainer who's qualified and certified in this particular, let's say, area with whatever the behavior is that you're seeing. It's hard for me to even think about this whole topic of rehoming because I think of it more broadly as part of this evolving natural conversation that's happening, and that it's going to look different depending on, back to those roles we talked about, what your role is in this conversation, in this relationship. Are you the consultant? Are you the trainer? Are you the veterinarian? Are you the client? Are you the dog? Are you a friend or family member?
Wait, whoa, hang on. Are you the dog?
That's
Brian,
right.
I don't think a lot of dogs watch my channel. I mean, I don't know I guess if any dogs are watching, leave a comment and let us know because
Please do.
I'm interested, and just tell us, like, are you a golden retriever? Are you an Aussie? Are you a Samoyed? I have a thing for Samoyeds.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Samoyeds.
Oh, Brian, I used to dog sit for this delightful Samoyed named Bella, and she was just she reminded me a lot of my cat Zoloft, but like a dog version, but she was beautiful and she was sweet, but she was very opinionated.
They are beautiful dogs.
Oh, they are. So much fur, though. So much fur. It's like glitter. It never goes away.
Never goes away. I think the whole conversation related to what your role is, you're going to have a different responsibility there in terms of, are we looking at a question of rehoming? And to me, that is one of many potential, not many, but let's say several potential outcomes we could be looking at. Again, this is with the guise of this is the client's decision to make. I go through a decision tree. So one of my favorite people to listen to, and this is just a plug for him, Dr. Chris Pockle, who's a board certified veterinary behaviorist. We know who he is.
We are fans.
Absolutely fantastic. I've like sat in on a bunch of his workshops and webinars. He's presented a lot on navigating difficult conversations in these cases. And I kind of adapt what he talks a lot about as sort of a decision tree. And I've used that for a very long time in my cases. I don't think there's a specific time to kind of come to that decision tree. Do we have that safety piece? That's the first part of the decision tree is like, do we have safety, or can we maintain that safety, I should say, with the dog living in the home? That's the first part of that conversation. A lot of what I do is work through a risk assessment prior to this. It's a part of a behavior consult, in particular in aggression cases where there are bites. Triggers for the behavior, kind of what's the chaos factor going on in the home, so to speak. It looks at the context. Can we prevent that behavior? Can we not? If there have been bites, obviously, like the injury, the bite level, all of that. So you kind of put together that risk assessment. And I do that for clients to say, okay, so this is that risk assessment. Knowing that, can we achieve and maintain that safety in the home? That then also involves those resources, that question of resources. Because let's say if we don't, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but if we don't have the ability to, say, purchase, say we live in a open layout home, so we've got to put up a lot of gates for some separation areas. Do we have the ability to purchase gates? I mean, they're not cheap. Gates are $150 a pop.
If you get a good one, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And if you get a nice walkthrough with an auto close feature and all of that for dogs that are sturdy enough to withstand, let's say, an 80-pound dog on one side. And so you need to create those separation areas as that basic minimum, let's just say, safety, do we have the resources to do that if we're going to say that's our starting point? And then from that, we can talk about what is it acceptable for you as the client to decide what that level of risk is. What's an acceptable level of risk? I, again, leave that up to the client to decide, because that's oftentimes, I think, where folks get hung up is, okay, well, we don't have safety now, but might we be able to achieve that? I don't know. And can we achieve it to an acceptable level is always the question I find like we need to get to. So once we get that answered, then that informs us about the next step. If the answer is yes, we think we can, right? Or maybe we're not sure, who knows? We move forward with, okay, let's work on a behavior plan that involves some behavior change, meeting those needs, right, of that individual dog. And then management, right, safety, absolutely got to have that. And then let's move forward with a plan. What does that specifically look like for you and your dog? We work that out. If the question is, no, we don't think we can get there, or you know what, maybe this isn't a good quality of life for that particular dog. If we cannot achieve that safety and maintain that, then the question of rehoming might come into play. Is there somewhere else? Is there an alternative place where this dog can be safely managed? That might look different. That might be a private party. That might be, a shelter, a rescue organization. That might even just be a temporary respite. The question of, is that an option, is usually hard to kind of tease out. I think that's where a lot of the time in the conversation that happens, where there's a lot of swirling, right? Because that we're dealing with a lot of emotionality behind these decisions. So I'm oftentimes kind of pulling back. We might take a step back for a second. Some animals have been adopted out. If it's an animal that's been adopted, the rescue might have a return policy. Those are really tricky, and I oftentimes question that decision. If the risk assessment is indicating there's a high severity of behavior, there's a lot of risk here, a future bite's likely to happen, particularly injurious, as I say, it's aggression towards humans in particular, or children. Even returning the dog to the rescue can be a little tricky, because is that necessarily the decision that you want to make? What are the implications for that dog going back into the system, so to speak, going back into a foster home, into the community, and then onto an adoptive permanent home? So usually with certain high level bites, that's where I'm really hesitant to move forward with a rehoming. A lot of rescue organizations and shelters, understandably, don't necessarily have a lot of resources to be dedicated to behavior change, working with a behavior consultant on an ongoing basis, especially before that dog goes into a new home. And even then, if you do it there, is the adopter going to be able to keep up with that once the dog gets placed into a home? If I am going to be on board with, let's say, rehoming as a behavior consultant, I'm going to say, I think you could rehome this dog. I think they could be safely managed with these restrictions in place. Oftentimes that's a really dicey situation. At that point, if we don't have a rehoming option for that dog in particular, the only other safe alternative would be the consideration of behavioral euthanasia. It's hard to just isolate the rehoming thing and say, when would you rehome, when would you not? It's like, okay, there's a lot that goes into that.
I think that's actually a really good point for a lot of people to understand, is that this is a really complicated topic, and it's not as simple as rehoming is always the solution or it's never the solution. Like, it is not that black and white, and
it depends on a whole lot of different factors. Absolutely. That are so circumstantial.
One other thing that it's not always a consideration, but sometimes it is. And I see this a lot because the bulk of what I do is inter-cat conflict. And oftentimes it's like a couple is moving in together, families are combining, and things happen between the cats. There's also the emotional, interpersonal impact, especially if it's a situation where the dog or cat came in in from one part of a couple, but the other one's having problems with the animal, or it's a conflict between multiple animals that came from separate homes, or one person is like, I'm really like, I will sell a kidney in order to keep this animal in our home. The other one, which is probably illegal, please don't do that.
Great disclaimer.
Anyway, the point of all that being is that it can impact the human dynamics in the home too. Like it can devolve the relationship if it ends up getting there. And there's so many layers that you have to dig through.
From making a decision to rehome, let's say, or not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the other like, no matter which way you go, there is oftentimes some fallout from that. And that's why I just think that it's so important to be talking and working with a qualified dog behavior professional to help you sift through.
Or cat behavior professional, we exist too. Or capybara behavior professional. Or
That's right.
whale behavior
I
professional.
was going to say hamster behavior professional. I know one of those.
Really?
Yeah, she's awesome.
I want to learn more about like rabbits or like hamsters or like other animals.
I would say who she is, but I don't think she has her business up and running yet. And if she's listening to this, she knows who she is. And this is a little nudge.
Assuming she's fun and she would fit the vibe and Prozac approves. She is welcome on my channel if she wants to come in and talk about cats and, you know, pocket pets. Or should pocket pets actually be put in pockets? Is that a bad thing? To me, I'd be nervous about like accidentally forgetting they're there and squishing them. So like I would never
Probably
do it.
not.
Speaking of complicated things, and again, we obviously both know this is a complicated conversation, but why do you think that there's so much stigma surrounding rehoming or not rehoming? Or where do you think that comes from? Because to me, like hearing how complicated this is, my inclination would be to be like, yeah, that's a hard decision. It sucks. I'm sure it was done. It wasn't easy on them. But where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from probably a lot of different places. I think
Speaking of complicated,
it's a matter of perception in my mind, you know, and what we perceive of others and their actions or their intentions, what we perceive of ourselves, how we perceive that society sees us. You know, I'm thinking back to my shelter experience, and that a lot of, at least my second animal shelter operations leadership job, was very much on the people side, and a lot of the staff were just incredibly professional. I think as difficult as, let's say, it is to work on to do 10 intakes a day, let's say, for an animal coming in, you develop a certain bias there, a certain narrative that then informs what you're thinking about. It probably feeds into your previous beliefs, previous experiences, childhood, growing up, like, right, all of that. What do animals mean in your world? What are they, sentient beings? All those kinds of questions. That oftentimes I feel like is really difficult for folks that are kind of on the front lines of animal welfare to be able to tease that out and to be able to not become jaded or sort of judgy. I will say, in reflection, again, based on my experience at working in the shelter world, there was just a range of, some folks were able to balance that really well. Other folks had a difficult time with it. It's something I've struggled with over years. And now I when we are talking about, let's say, rehoming is on the table, right, with all those complications, I oftentimes view it, and I think a lot of families do too, once they kind of process through the emotions and the grief and the loss around all of that and all the other feelings, oftentimes view it as a positive experience for knowing that dog is going to be able to have that environment that they needed, that square peg round hole thing, it just wasn't working, that we were able to find an alternative option. Sometimes that takes work. Sometimes it's a multiple rehoming situation. If it's a return to a rescue, the rescue adopts the dog into a foster home and then onto an adoptive home. It might get returned again. There can be that cycle that happens. Oftentimes it ends up resulting in some greater welfare for that dog. That dog's needs getting met, or that cat, hamster, etc. It is much more complicated with dogs because of the risk factor. Have teeth, will use.
Even though
right?
Cat bites, the infection risk is really
That's true. Yeah.
That's like, I
2 weeks in intensive care because of a cat bite. Yeah.
I remember when I was going through PA school that, like, when we were talking about, like, you know, infectious disease stuff, they said, like, one of the things to look for on, like, our board exams was if they mention a cat bite, they need to be on, like, you know, some hardcore antibiotics, and you should be starting to think, like, uh-oh, this is bad. Like, that is not a piece of information to ignore. I think, again, it's kind of like how people sometimes frame cats as being, like, teeny tiny, easy dogs, which is problematic on many levels, but the risks are different. Dogs will, like, do, like, a lot of, like, physical damage, and you can absolutely get an infection from that. But with cats, a lot of it is the infection risk. They have some nasty bacteria in their mouths. Or if you're poutine and you're just coming home from being adopted, you bring home butt parasites, and then daddy gets to steam clean everything and bleach your litter box every time you take a poop in it.
Oh, isn't that fun?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that, didn't we, Prozac? We did not have a lot of fun with that.
Prozac has been very chillaxed.
My producer is sleeping on the job. That actually is his job, is to nap. So
that's right.
One other thing I want to talk about really quick too is a lot of people are concerned about the welfare of their animal if they do decide to rehome and going through the shelter system. And obviously we've acknowledged that it's stressful. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of look at it as like going to the hospital in some ways, where it's like, yeah, it's not the most pleasant place in the world, but there are some hospitals that are going to be nicer than others. And the same is true with any sort of like rescue or sheltering organization. Do you have any tips for people to look out for when working with an organization? Is there anything that's like just a massive red flag? Like, what are some things, especially from your experience, having been on the inside, that people should look for?
That is a really great question. I think there's probably you could look at the, obviously the non-profit status of that organization. Most, at least in Minnesota, they're nonprofits.
Are there for-profit shelters?
Not in Minnesota that I know of.
Okay.
But,
I was like, that seems like a weird business model.
I will say, so municipal shelters, so like animal control facilities, their funding would probably come from city budgets, right? So, right, which would be different than a nonprofit. But yeah, I mean, I would be looking at some really basic stuff. Does that organization have a website? Do they have animals listed up for adoption on their website? Is there a board of directors, right? Oh, who's the leadership team? That background information, I'm just kind of that basic vetting that you would be thinking about. Let's say if you were hiring a dog trainer, a cat behavior consultant, what have you, a veterinarian, you would be looking for some of that information. So that would be the starting point, understanding what their intake process might be. A lot of shelters and rescue organizations get flooded pretty regularly with requests for, surrenders. Sometimes it can take some time especially I think for rescue organizations, because they're usually volunteer run. For the most part, there's going to be a little bit of a delay to get information back from the organization to understand what their specific process is. So that's what I would kind of be asking to start off of. What is your specific process for surrender? What kind of screening do you do? Is he giving you directives again?
He did and it was adorable. Sorry, you were saying something very important, very serious, and I was just like, oh my God, my cat is doing like the cutest thing.
I would be wanting to understand what the process is for surrender. Most rescue organizations, shelters have that on their website. Some may have a behavior support line. I would say doing some vetting of the organization is the starting point. That is probably the most important. Understanding what their policy, if any, is for placement. Sometimes that's not always written and clear. That, I was talking about my previous experience way back many years ago. When I started, there weren't policies written down, right? And so that was one of the things that we worked on as we moved along was like, let's get some policies written down on paper, some guidelines. So that is really important too, to understand what that placement might look like.
It sounds like transparency from the organization is important. Where
Absolutely. I think that is really important, to have a level of transparency. Now, a lot of times folks will want to know, can I have continuing contact, let's say, to keep updates about this? A lot, for privacy reasons and confidentiality reasons, a lot of times organizations don't provide that, rightfully so, because if an animal gets adopted into a new home, legal ownership has changed. There's probably some legalities there, ethical concerns about having a previous owner contact the new owner, those sorts of things.
I want to add too, for the record, like I have had clients that have gotten cat has been rehomed, and then somehow I end up with the new home. I just don't provide. I also don't do that because I'm not. That's unfortunately part of it, is that you have to recognize, okay, you've played an important role in this animal's life.
Absolutely. Yes.
You are now helping them get to a place where they can hopefully thrive. And in some ways you have to kind of trust that that's what's happening, because, and even let's say they end up in a really bad spot, you have to feel like, okay, I did my best and you did what you could given, any number of things.
We all do the best we can with the information that we have at the time. Like, I just think that is an important takeaway from our talk today, is we're all doing the best we can with the skills that we have and the information we have, which is why it's important to involve someone with experience to support us through this process, because I just think that's so beneficial.
It's different with dogs, it sounds like, than it is with cats, but I know with cats, a lot of times you rehome them and the behavior concern that people have just goes away. Like the number of times I've had clients that have hired me for other things and they're like, oh yeah, the cat used to have a litter box issue and now like it's totally resolved. And it just is kind of amazing, that environment animal mismatch. Sometimes it really is.
If I could just share this example, because this is so relevant for what's happening with me right now. I'm currently pet sitting with my admin assistant's dog and my dog. So they're separated, and watching body language through our buffer system with our gates and everything. I'm like, oh, they're actually pretty interested. I know both these dogs really well. What we ended up doing was doing just like a brief introduction with one of my dogs, well, both my dogs, we did this separately, and my admin assistant's dog, based on the observations I was seeing, right? And me knowing a lot about them, I was like, they actually want to meet and play together. And I called my admin assistant up and I said, do we want to do this introduction? I'm kind of thinking they were actually pushing for it. Absolutely, let's do it. And so I set it up really well, had my safety tools and all of that in case things went south. And they just were beautiful. The two female pitties were just beautiful playing together. My thinking was, I don't know, two female bullies. One's an adolescent, one's a senior. My dog, Jelly, is the senior. She's kind of like Jelly cut a... She kind of has that mentality under certain conditions, specifically around resources. So I made sure to manage those resources under those conditions in this environment, with their legs being what they were at that moment. I was pretty safely assured that was going to work out well. I didn't realize they would really like to play with each other like they did. I mean, they just didn't want to stop. They're like, this is great. Just totally gassed. I did not anticipate that level of joy that we were going to see. Different environment. My house versus your house probably worked out good, and that the way we did it was kind of in more of a little bit of a neutral area. So anyways, it worked out perfectly, but I just think we sometimes forget this thing about behavior being fluid, being complex. It's always changing. It's not static. And therefore, it isn't something we can just poof, cure, right? It's a reflection. I love that. Can you do that again? That was great. Where's the confetti?
But I do have a serious question. Actually, it's from Poutine. He wants to know if there is an option. Let's say that I'm not giving him enough snacks and he wants to rehome his human. Is there something, is that an option out there? Is that something that can be done? Or
I don't know. Probably,
Good.
but I'm just tending toward. I think he's probably stuck with you.
I have one more serious question, and then we have the most important question in the entire world here. That again, Brian, I hope you're prepared for that one. So I'm not gonna lie, this is a selfish question. I'm mostly a little bit curious about this myself. So with cats, there sometimes will be like working cat programs where the cat is just not well socialized. The cat just gets labeled as being like, okay, this isn't a cat that would do well as like a family pet. They can go live on a farm or in a store or like a warehouse or something, and basically just get to, mice all day. Which, if you're a cat, that might be delightful. Sounds like a good, placement. Is there an equivalent for dogs? Like, is there like I was trying to think of like, I'm like, what would dogs do?
I think for certain dogs, like let's say working lines, for sure. I've had several cases where a dog was rehomed. So I'm going to give you an example here. I had been working with a client. It was an organization. The foster it was a herding dog mix, pretty young dog. Dog had been living with a foster in a loft in busy city environment. I did an initial assessment and was like, oof, wow, this is tough, because we couldn't even really get the dog out of the building without the dog being over threshold, barking and lunging. As I recall, I think the foster was pretty new to fostering, so this was really challenging. This was a really challenging case for all. The rescue was really doing everything they could. The foster was just doing everything they could. And so, absolutely, we needed urgent emotional relief quickly. So we started that and started the conversation of, okay, this is a herding dog. Doesn't have a high-level bite history. All the bites have been pretty ritualized, so not doing a lot of injury, and hadn't inflicted any skin contact bites. We ended up really just trying to get the conversation started. How do we get this dog out for walks? Let's start there. Medication was a big part of that, and we also worked on some enrichment games in the house that they can do. Some of those basic things. But even that's some pretty heavy lifting for a newer foster to do all of that, right? But we started ticking away at that. I came back several months later for another session, and we were still spinning our wheels. We had gotten the medication going, wasn't really cutting through that arousal. So now we're talking about needing to bring in a veterinary behaviorist because we just didn't have an alternative option. And again, this dog with the owner was just so sweet, and people in his inner circle, but he had a small inner circle. We didn't really have a lot of options. I got a call from the rescue organization asking, we found a cattle farm somewhere down south. They've got working cattle dogs. They have experience with those dogs. They're looking for a new cattle. I was like, how did you find that? And I just said, do your screening, do your adoption process, put appropriate limitations in place to safely manage the dog. And I got a photo probably a couple weeks later of the dog hanging out with the family, 4 other cattle dogs. He goes out, he works 16 hours a day on the farm. Now, I haven't heard any updates since, okay? However, we needed that environment shift. That was a working dog. They were able to find an environment that could provide those outlets for that dog to be a dog. I was absolutely just over the moon about this, because it was like, but are those options readily available for these dogs? No. They're just not. It's a bit of a unicorn. Search and rescue work, I think, is an area that we could probably explore more, because search and rescue teams, I think that can be a possibility for some of these dogs. I think a lot of it, too, is just the connections. Do we have those resources to, if we are looking, let's say if I am consulting on a case, do we know a potential option there?
I'm thinking for like even other species now, I'm imagining like rehoming like a hamster to like a working hamster factory where there's a bunch of little hamsters that like they're running on a bunch of wheels generating electricity. And I'm like, I wonder what other
forced hamster labor. I don't know that
we're not in favor of it. We're not just to be very clear. But I'm
Joey,
just
you're bringing us down a dangerous path here.
Listen, you never know. If it's the only option and they're otherwise treated well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to yuck their yum. Brian, I want to be respectful of your time, and I don't want to take up your entire night, but we do have a really important question that I need answered before you can go. And
Okay, I'm ready.
As I always warn people, this is the single most important question you will ever be asked, and it will follow you for the rest of your days. So please take your answer seriously. Are you more of a poutine or are you more of a Prozac?
I knew this was coming.
Prozac is asleep, so he can't hear your answer. And remember, we're saying which one do you relate to more, not which one do you prefer, because that's a Sophie's choice level. We can't answer that question.
I think I would say Prozac.
Did you hear that? No, you didn't hear that, Prozac. What leads you to say Prozac?
Guilty by association. He's been present for the entire wonderful talk that we've had here. His leadership and supervisory skills are fierce. I don't want to give him too much of an ego here. Look at that. It feels like he's in his throne. That's what this feels like.
As I always say, these two do run things around. Oh, look at that. Oh, God, Prozac. No matter how many times I see him do that, I'm just like, so many feels.
My lovely auntie is a huge, huge cat lover. She's just going to be dying if she's watching this video. I mean, this is just, look at those mitts too.
He has perfect paws.
And I'm pretty sure he's been in that position for like the last 30 minutes here. That's impressive too.
He's got some good napping skills.
But I also have to give a shout out to Poutine for the brief cameo. Hey, how's it going? What's up? Later, I'm out. I can appreciate that too. Oh, there's another big oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're very
So,
sweet.
can I change my answer? Both.
Oh, we've never had a both before.
I'm going to have to say both. I mean,
You're them as a unit.
them as a unit.
Where can people find you on the interwebs if they want to see more, hear more, hire to help with their dog? Where do you exist online?
Leapsandhoundsbehavior.com is our website. We have a dog behavior consulting page that you can click on there. We also have our about section, so you can read my background, our company, my certifications, as well as book a consult online. So we also offer puppy consults as well. So those are a little bit shorter in length, but we have our care puppy program. We're also on social media, on YouTube and on Facebook and Instagram, Leaps and Hounds Behavior. So that's where you can find us.
Prozac, we will try and post a link.
He thinks that's a good idea.
Yeah, he's like, you should definitely post links in the
he's
description.
He's raising a paw for that.
He's like, I agree. I will go in and I will press all the buttons to put the links in the description.
That's right. With those beautiful big mitts that he has.
And I will edit them to make sure that they are the correct links and not just random gobbledygook, because that is what tends to happen every time these two try and write something.
Just so long as he has the opportunity to supervise you when you're doing that, I think that's the most important piece.
He is the one who really runs the show around here, and Poutine is in charge of snacks. He's our caterer.
And mostly for himself.
He's mostly like, you should feed me, and then if you need to, you can go pay for something yourself.
Yes.
You can make your own food. And I'm like, Poutine, you're not a very good caterer.
Oh, oh my God, he's putting his paws over his, oh my gosh. Well, thank you
Brian,
for having me on.
Thank
you for doing what you do. It's always wonderful chatting with you. I learn a lot.
Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. And again, I really appreciate it because you have such a rich set of experiences and skills. Prozac also says thank you for joining us. This piece of body language means thank you in cat. It's not actually what it means. Don't listen to me about that.
I'm going to choose to believe that, and I'm going to run with that.
Sometimes you just have to choose to believe.